I want to welcome everybody to the Fleming tonight. Can you hear me okay? Clearly? Okay. I'm Janie Cohen, I'm director of the museum, and we're really delighted to have you for this really special event tonight. I first met Jason Smeltzer, I can't remember, 5 years ago, 6 years ago?
2010, 2011, somewhere in there.
Something like that. And really wanted to bring him to Burlington, and we realized this was the perfect opportunity with the exhibition Staring Back that has the radical early 20th century art and pretty rad early 21st century technology, that this was a really great opportunity to present him on Theremin, which, as many of you probably know, is a 1920s instrument that uses electricity and no touch. You do not touch it, which you'll see. So Jason has been, for the past over 10 years, has been performing and doing demonstrations on the theremin in museums and libraries, universities and classrooms. He has played with, or appeared in a wide range of duos, wide range in terms of kinds of music, including classical and jazz repertoire, guitar and vocals, and most recently with a country band, which I just heard. Imagine that. He's been collaborating for many years in a little jam band duo with Vermont-based musician, artist, and psychiatrist Peter Tomashaw, who will be with us at some point tonight. His projects are very interdisciplinary. He's worked with Middle Eastern dancers, with New York-based video artist Robert Bowen, artist collaborators George Quasha and Charles Stein, with poet-authors Philip Mosley and Robert Anderson, and with Chinese medical arts practitioner Kathy Wang. And then in collaboration with illustrator Ted Michalowski, he has performed every summer at art venues in Poland. So please join me in welcoming Jason Smeltzer.
This is the hard part. I'd actually forgotten about most of that. It's a nice update. Before I do something, does anyone have any questions? Does anyone, I'm assuming everyone want me to start by doing something as strange as possible. Is that? I can do that. First, you do have to tune the instrument, though. That was mildly based on an Alban Berg piece, if there's any Alban Berg fans in the ensemble, which was written right around the time of Picasso, 1910, somewhere in that territory. One of Schoenberg's students. Any questions now?
Yeah. How the heck does that work?
Good question. Does anyone want to know how the heck that works?
Yes.
Can everyone hear me? It seems... You good? I actually wasn't even using it.
Oh, okay.
Is that even better? No. Let's see. A little bit of help. This is the hard part. How's that? How's that?
Yes.
It'd be really funny if I did that again, wouldn't it? That's pretty good though, isn't it? Even from here. Okay. How does it work? This is your pitch antenna. The closer you are to that, the higher the pitch is. And basically you have a 5-octave glissando in the air. When you speak clearly. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a tough one. It's good for theremin, but not lectures. This is the pitch antenna. The closer you are to it, the higher the pitch is. And basically you have a 5-octave range right there. The curved antenna that you might be able to see is where you articulate from. The closer you are to it, the quieter it is. And that's basically it. When you tune it, you actually are tuning it to your body. For everyone, it's a little bit different. You're using what's referred to as capacitance. Everything with mass has some type of capacitance. And the closer something with capacitance gets to the antenna, the more excited it gets. That's then hooked up to something called an oscillator. The oscillator gets more excited and rotates more rapidly, more or less than producing a sound.
Do the notes have any overtones to them?
This would probably be as simple an overtone series as you would get. Like it's not as complex as a piano or anything like that, but certainly they're there. Does that answer your question?
With all the dials and stuff, is that sort of percussion?
These are extracurricular. For the most part, the only reason that we know what a theremin is today is because a gentleman by the name of Bob Moog had a passion for the story, which is the history of the instrument is very interesting. I'll get into some of that. But he had always, a lot of inventors had sort of had a passion for it because it came with the invention of radio, basically. And Bob Moog's start was just building theremins just for his amusement. He was a novice musician, but that led him down the road to building all kinds of contraptions. And essentially, he was responsible for analog synthesis. He's basically the father of it, but it started with Leon Theremin in the 1920s. Anyone else?
Did you build that yourself?
I didn't. I have built them, just because thereminists are supposed to build them. But I'm not really an electronics person, and the one I built, I've never taken out of the house. Are there any? Yeah. No, go ahead.
What is your actual history with the instrument? How did you come to it?
Oh, you guys love this. It's I bought it as a joke. Over 10 years ago, I had a musical background. I was mainly repairing sousaphones and things like that. But always had a fascination with early 20th century music and some of the troublemakers from around the period of the 1920s, 1910 in that area. There was a lot of electricity going on, E equals MC squared in Sigmund Freud, and there was all this being applied into the arts. And I'd always heard of a theremin, but it was always this strange thing that had its day, and that's really all I knew about it. And I was just online. And 10 years ago, this little thing was under $300. It's a very simple instrument. It's just that I would say there are many reasons why you don't see them. It's very easy to embarrass yourself. You really need to have a musical background and throw it away and apply it all to this ambiguous, unknown, nearly unplayable, there's middle C. How do you teach that? Then have the faith to there's an octave. you almost need to desensitize it and have a musical background and just trust yourself to know how to develop having the knowledge of what music should sound like and so forth. Even like playing a scale or something like that. Good questions. Are there any requests? No? No requests? I think I should break out some of the Chinese stuff. We were talking Chinese. Has anyone ever heard Chinese music played on a theremin before? Since that was in my biography, I gotta. So it does help to have Chinese accompaniment, but I think you'll get the flavor of it. That's usually one of the dilemmas with the theremin is often it isn't flavored. Like the idea of playing Spanish music on a theremin or Chinese, it's usually many of the better ones, they'll focus on classical repertoire, and they'll lose the flick and certain elements of it. It becomes very much almost too academic sometimes, which is why you'd never see them. It's, never.
I heard it was used on the Beach Boys, Good Vibration.
More or less. It was same sound principle. I always say it was something at the time in the Moog biography, it mentions that the Beach Boys met Bob Moog and he showed him the theremin, and they said, "Oh, come on." But around the same time, I forget the inventor's name, he just passed away in the last couple of years, but he had invented something not like what I was telling you about, but it was basically the same sound principle, but it had a painted keyboard. No, I don't think so, but it's relative to that. And you had a ring on your finger and you followed the keyboard. So same sound principle, but and I think it's accredited as a theremin just because they didn't even have a name for this other instrument yet, so they simplified it. And you would think after all these years I'd know the Beach Boys theme. I know it's something like that, but I've never really, I've never really done it. But here's just a simple Chinese motif. I can't even translate the name. It has something to do with autumn. Any other questions? Any requests? Yes, at the top.
Well, would you be able to put it through like a granular distortion with like a rhythmic element to it? I was just wondering if you could play it like you would a guitar.
Oh, sure. Oddly, just because it's such a simple waveform, distortion you would tend to find in itself is disappointing because you can't really control it like most instruments would. It just becomes a hard to control sound. But that's essentially what a lot of these are, even though at the moment I'm sort of holding back. But Usually, that's why the Moog tends to lean towards this, because of the monophonic tendencies of it and so forth. But you can definitely mix it up. Should I mix it up?
Yeah, sure.
Mix it up. Let's see, how do I want to mix it up? Let's see. There's so many options. The funny thing with all this old school technology is you never know exactly what's going to happen over here. Like, I have some ballpark ideas.
How old is that? 70s?
Well, it's in the last 10 years, but it's 70s technology. It's basically the Moog vintage idea. Okay, I think this is going to work. And things like that. Once I get rolling with accompaniment, you know, I can sort of sculpt that into actually working, but it's a little bit daunting here in front of everybody.
I think you should collaborate with an animator.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Oh, you mean as far as this aspect of it? Oh, look at this guy. You have no idea how honored you are to be in this audience with the gentleman who just walked in. Any requests, Peter?
Hello, Jason.
Hello, Peter. Well, I know Peter's a Beatles fan. Would you like some Beatles? Would everyone like to hear some Beatles? Let's see, I get my Beatles book out over here. I had a request for some Beatles this morning. I hadn't done Beatles in a long time. Oh, yeah. By the way, when you change books with a theremin, or if you go from page 1 to 100, you have to retune the instrument. Like I said, many reasons why you don't see them. Fool on the Hill? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry about that. Should I try it again? What do you think? Sure. One more time, full on the hill. I'll do it higher just for variety. Any other questions? Oh?
Is there a special musical notation for theremin?
Not really. There's really not much written for theremin. So essentially 9 out of 10 what I'm playing would usually be a vocal. Like a lot of vocal repertoire. Almost outside of jazz, like where I'd be playing ahead or something like that. Jazz a lot of times would be a saxophone part or whatever. Usually I would be the main line though, as opposed to an inner voice. But if someone had developed notation specifically for theremin, I'm sure it never saw the light of day. Because there's really only about 2 pieces that, the score to The Day the Earth Stood Still, a little bit of Hitchcock, but very little else, as far as outside of anything like very abstract or anything in that school. Any questions? Oh.
I first became familiar with the instrument as a background in film.
The Hitchcock.
And also science fiction films. Is it used much now?
It's kind of now with the internet and so forth. And there have been a few festivals and things like that. And there is a group called the New York Theremin Society that's trying to raise the bar for it. Because outside of some of the films that kind of brought it to light and made it popular, usually a lot of times it'll be a noisemaker. So that's another reason why you don't see a lot of them. Most often it has a little bit of a bad reputation. And usually I run into a lot of people who will, after seeing a performance or something, they'll go invest in one and be very excited for a very short period of time. And you don't hear much after that.
So what are you looking at in your notebook?
Vocal. Basically standard notation, a lot of piano pieces, things like that. But I'm looking, it's basically your normal do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's a lot of solfege is going through my skull while I'm doing anything. Or if it's a complicated piece, there's usually a homework assignment a little bit before it, just so I see what is actually happening.
So I noticed when you're playing the Chinese piece that you don't have the limitations that a lot of Western instruments do when it comes to like semitones and
right.
And yet at the same time, it seems like that's also maybe the most difficult part. Is that controlling? You don't have the structure of a scale.
There it is, right.
You would have like with a fretted instrument or an automatic instrument like a piano. Is that really probably the most difficult part of playing? It's the whole balancing act. Like the more, it really comes down to the ear. The more information you can get from where you are. Like I never know what that note will be, but as soon as I can identify it, sculpture is a good example of it. Right. Like I can't jump to a flavorful quarter step off of something to make it sound more yummy in some way, but at the same time I know where to get that. Just like a voice. Just like a voice would know how to. Somebody said play a D, you couldn't play a D.
No. I just make a joke out of it and move on.
Those of us who are familiar with string instruments know that as you move up the scale, those differences between become shorter and shorter. Do you find that to be the case with the antenna as well? Your half step down here is very short.
Interesting that I brought that up in the theory class this morning, very briefly, because that question comes up from time to time, probably mainly from string players. And the interesting thing about that question from way back when is I wasn't sure. I hadn't really thought about it. Like I'd always just been listening, and my general answer has been, for the most part, no. But you will notice as you get into low range, you get closer to your body. So for that reason, it starts to squash and be uncontrollable, and a little bit so in the upper range. But I think if you had a theremin range that continued farther and farther, I would tend to think that you would find that it's consistent. But I've never really tested that to be sure because I'm always in the way.
What does the foot pedal do?
It is a safety device. It is a safety device. It is basically, not so much. Usually 4 out of 5, it's just on or off. But the thing is, these being a very simple thing, if you walk away from it, it's actually at full volume. And anyone walking by it will hear a burglar alarm type sound. And A fun thing to do, though, I do a lot of demonstrations. I brought this up in class, is that if I'm doing something at a high school or something, and it's interesting how this instrument kind of desensitizes even high schoolers who've been everywhere and seen everything and know everything. And I don't think I'll get in trouble with this, but usually what I do is like inevitably some cute girl will come up, and she's you know, in front of all her friends, and you know, there's this, you know, there's all this pride at stake and so forth. You don't want to embarrass yourself when you're a cute girl in front of all your friends. So I don't tell them about the safety device. There's always one or two that, and basically, hopefully no one will get hurt. But so they'll come up and they'll be, you know, playing along, and nothing will really, and then when they're finally ready to they go like that, and they try to get around it like this, and they in that moment of panic, they believe there is a way to figure it out. And usually somewhere after the third, minus the safety device trying to escape, they'll look to me for help. And I just go, it doesn't do that for me. I don't know.
Explain in a fairly simple way what the physics are in this. Is there a magnetic electrical field?
Essentially, like, and I would just be reiterating, like I'm not really familiar with the physics necessarily, but I was kind of saying earlier how objects with mass have capacitance. So in here are capacitors. So as something with capacitance gets closer to the antenna, the capacitor gets more excited. However, that translates into electricity. And then that's hooked up to an oscillator. And as the capacitor becomes more excited, the oscillator spins faster. And there are actually two oscillators, just to be more cryptic, talking about the physics of it. It produces a vibration. The vibration is actually beyond what we can hear, but between the two, you're actually hearing a vibration between the two. One is constant and the other one is following what you're doing here. So you're hearing a vibration between those two oscillators that's then amplified. Sort of like a ghost vibration.
Someone got the invite for tonight's performance for someone to the logical place to figure out what Theremin is, and YouTube. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it was you, but someone performed Over the Rainbow.
Oh.
I was wondering if you could possibly tackle that.
You know, I don't have Over the Rainbow under my belt. I don't think I have the music on me either. I've tinkered with it at some random points where that question, like someone was just doing it, but I would probably embarrass myself more than you would forgive. But a standard is a good idea. How about a standard? How
about the Star Trek?
Oh, this guy again. How about the Star Trek theme? I think I can do that one from memory. Does everyone know the Star Trek theme? Yeah. I did it this morning in the theory class. And I had Sylvia play strange chords, whatever she wanted underneath it. It was very attractive. I get that a lot, the articulation end of it.
Would it change the sound a lot if you just kept your hands fingers together?
With this being all about just articulating the note, like essentially, you know, whatever's happening over here. When I first started, one of my notions of how to approach it was for the sake of developing technique and intuition, was to just practice everything as staccato as possible, which requires a lot of muscle power. And just intuitively discovering that the more variety I give this hand, because you actually use as much physical effort to start a note as you do to stop a note. So there's, just for doing Star Trek or a scale. I mean, that's a lot of, it's a little bit of a marathon runner kind of thing for all the more you're doing. So that, and essentially there's, a lot of times it comes up that it looks like it's something very specific, but basically I've just trained it to whatever is the easiest next available muscle series to take care of the problem, does it? I mean, there have been cases where the wrist will go into it or whatever just to solve the problem. But it's all, like I don't even, you know, almost detached from it.
Do you have a favorite piece?
Probably the Albenberg comes up a lot, the one I started with. I tend to go there a lot. Would you like to hear another weird Albenberg type of thing? All this 1910 stuff. While I'm setting it up, it is an interesting story that this set of pieces, it's a set of 4, and they're all very ambiguous. And the piano part is ridiculous and also very ambiguous, but it does support the vocal line. And a pianist and I were looking at them and said, when you look at them, it just looks like a black page. It says, there's no way this is going to make any sense. But Berg was as much a troublemaker as he was very much still looking back at the Romantic era. So when you put it together, there is a song there. And oh, that's great, there's like a heart, but he's crazy. So we decided for this recital coming up in a month or whenever to do these 4 pieces. And we'd never heard them before. And there again, the piano kind of supports my part until you get to the last one, where in no way does any note in the ambiguous chord that the piano is playing do anything to help me understand where I should be. And we'd gotten through the rest of the pieces and we got to the last one and I could not make it to the 3rd bar. Like I was playing the melody, but I had no idea if I was in the right range. And every single note, if you know music or music theory, every single note I have, with the exception of one random one, is a half step above or below every note that I have to hear, which is kind of, and when you do it right, it's yummy, but the amount of homework I had to put into getting through that recital, and I've only tried to perform it once since then. It's one of my favorites, but I'd show it to you, but I'd have to retune. And I'll make this weird for everybody. I know you guys like a little bit of, get some low end going in there. Any other questions? Way in the back.
When I think of Theremin, you usually think of Clara Rachmaninoff.
Oh, definitely. I might be able to pull that off. Actually, one I've done a lot more recently. She's also very well known for the Rachmaninoff. Could I change your mind to the Rachmaninoff? Although Rachmaninoff Acapella 2 is a little bit of a stretch, but you guys seem pretty friendly, so. Rachmaninoff is hard. This is Rachmaninoff's Vocalise, which was actually written for piano and voice, but the voice is always just on an ah. So it was always a natural, it's almost a Theremin standard. Actually, I'm going to take this thing off too. Not that it's that hard, but it's... takes a lot, you know, you have to have this up here for a long time. How are we doing on time? What's our...
A couple more questions?
Couple more questions?
Do you find that there are any keys or modes that are more difficult to maintain a sense of the original context?
Not really.
Slip accidentally and recontextualize it as...
No, it's more a matter of like, there are relationships that'll throw you off. Like, jazz is a big struggle because every chord change is kind of its own world, and also there's so much, everything that helps me in classical music is actually just a color in jazz. So everything that's pointing me here in jazz is just like, have a nice day. You know, it's like, see, and land on your feet at some point. That would be the main thing, are like dominant chords that, like if you know your music theory, the 5/7 chord that always wants to go here, and you always hear it, you know, that tells you where you are. Whereas in jazz, they just love putting that thing anywhere, or even in blues. Yes.
Do you feel like a resistance of any sort when you're near the antenna, like there's no force or?
Not at all. I mean, loosely, and this is probably more psychological, not in a bad way, but I do notice that with the instrument that I'm most familiar with, that even though I'm just in the air, and that there's really nothing there, as opposed to even other theremins I've played, there's something that I find believably tactile at this point, just because I know what that means. But that's probably more up here than, yes?
So it makes me think of a amped-up version of George's Alien Heart, which has philosophical underpinnings and also implications. This comes out in 1920, and people drawn some great tricky philosophical or scientific inferences from that. I mean, it almost makes me think of, so the music, right, the sound is continuous, and you're kind of shaping it, right?
Right, sculpting.
Normal music, which is produced out of absence of sound. Have there been inferences or philosophical or scientific kind of speculation that Theremin has?
That's a little bit where Peter comes in, but for the most part, taking on an instrument where you're so absolutely dependent on what you hear, even though music is a hearing art, but it's rare that you're so dependent on, even comparing it to a voice where it's intuition, but there's still like a certain muscle intuition in here that you know. Whereas this one, even every environment, like I was saying, I have to retune if I turn a number of pages or change a book, or if suddenly someone's standing here. So there's never, you can have no faith in anything being constant, except for getting information from what you hear. And that, as far as playing music, really opened everything up, and once you cross that bridge, it simplifies everything.
It almost makes me think of, like, I saw a PBS NewsHour bit on, I think it was Miles O'Brien, like a journalist who now has a prosthetic. And so he's learning how to remotely manipulate things through some kind of prosthetic device now. And the first time he did it, because obviously nothing could be so quote-unquote natural as controlling things with a human hand, like he experienced this kind of wonder. But it was always a wonder that still included mechanical distance and, you know, mediation and weirdness.
Luckily, the wonder with this, like, took period over period of time. Like, I didn't just get thrown into, like, suddenly, like, you know, having no physical contact with it, you know, a note, as opposed to, like, having to always find something.
Is it like playing with a phantom limb, like people talk about? You know, like the thing that you're playing with, you're responding to as if it's physical, but it's not.
Right. That would be interesting to chew on a little bit. I've never actually really thought of it that way. Even though, like I was saying earlier, that there's a certain tactile notion which you probably could thread into a similar, you know, there's something there because that's what sound happens when I go there, and that's why I do that. Or even like a piece you get. But even from piece to piece in different situations, there's still an elasticity. Like even whatever the highest note is, it changes from room to room and space to space and things like that.
So what exactly are you retuning?
You're actually tuning a distance. Like I don't really pay too much attention to what the highest note would be, but you to control it and keep it from getting very molassesy, I would say, is that you just want it to stop before you get to your body. Because if it doesn't, your body is helping that much more. And plus there's a certain logic to the range that is controllable. If I break it out much, like I have to think that much more about what's happening there. Or you can compress it to being almost like there's the range if you wanted to. But essentially that's it. You're just tuning a space so that you know. And depending on the room and the situation, I'll actually place my music stand to where I'm tuned to what I'm kind of used to. A little bit of a buffer.
So you have a style, you have a certain technique which you taught yourself, but also based on a certain history and technique of playing theremin. In the vast array of theremin players in the world, are there unorthodox techniques? I mean, or is it pretty much always?
It's pretty straight. There would definitely be unorthodox techniques for playing unorthodox music. Like it's, you'll see guys go out with the antenna all crooked or something like that. For the most part, Clara Rockmore, that was mentioned earlier, she had a very meticulous technique, and most thereminists also stand where the fingers get into very specific intervallic, almost a process, where to me that always stiffened everything up. So every time I've gone that route, it doesn't apply well to improvisational situations or even like I was talking about flavor earlier. If you're playing Spanish music, you just want to do it. Whereas this is very meticulous and memorized and so forth. So you could say there are two schools, but most schools, when they're doing serious repertoire, will lean towards Claire Rockmore's approach. But I always joked that the better thereminists are stiff Russian women, which was true for a while. It's true.
Could you sort of exaggerate how you demonstrate the start, the end of a note, sort of like a sustained note versus ending it?
Move this guy a little bit.
I'm trying to see it.
Can you see this antenna? The very slow version. It's literally just like this is a glissando, this is the same thing. And just to get staccato, I just do it faster. So I'm essentially just as rapid as I can to kind of give the illusion of an attack, even though it's always going to be a swell. But just the farther away, the fuller the volume, and the closer you are, the quieter. And it's basically a volume knob almost. One more strange one, and yes?
I don't think it's strange. The music sounds very new, so-called new age. Are there any of the new age artists who use the theremin?
I think it's out there a little bit. Usually if it is new age, though, it's very, like a lot of dependence on echo and things like that. They'll keep it very simple and just like a little bit of a soundscape in most cases. I don't hear a lot of consequential theremin involvement in most, even in pop or anything like that. But there is, in the classical world, you get a little more. Usually it's something they just picked up, dabble with it, and apply it, and it's kind of like a little freshening of the air. It's usually not theremin, if you know what I mean.
Let's do one more short, strange piece.
Okay. Actually, I have some opera on my mind. I'll just take it out with some a little bit of Puccini sound. Any opera fans out there? Yeah. No? Yeah? I forgot that I retuned everything. Messing me up. Thank you.